Filmic Pro, what is this?
Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Felicia and today we're going to talk about filming on a mobile phone. Yes, I know, I've had a lot of trouble in the past filming on a mobile phone, and if some of you have been here from the beginning, you'll know that to be true. But last week my camera went out on a job without me. Yeah. So it did get me thinking about if I had to shoot on my mobile phone, how good would it be and how much of a cinematic image could I get out of that? Now, don't get me wrong, shooting on a mobile phone is totally fine, but it just isn't for me and for the style that I shoot in. But it's still okay if that's all you have access to, situationally it's something that you need to shoot on, or you just need to be as small and compact as possible to get into the areas that you need to shoot in. But despite how good phone cameras are getting these days, there's still fundamental flaws in the settings, in the apps, in everything, in the design of those cameras that can set you back in terms of getting a cinematic image. Well, that is, unless you invest a lot of time and money into making that work for you. What I'm saying is, if you want something that looks like it was shot on an ARRI camera, you're going to want to shoot on an ARRI camera. And if you want something that looks like it's shot on a RED, you're going to want to shoot on a RED. If you shoot on anything different, you're never going to get the same result. You can get close-ish, but it's never going to be the same. You can't make a camera work for what it isn't designed for and expect to get the same result. Maybe one day our phones will be closer to that, but right now they're just not. So enough of that, I'm going to bring you through my 3 tips for shooting on a mobile phone to get the best image you can. Tip number 1, and one of the most important ones, is settings. You have to think about the settings of your camera. Now, most phones can shoot in 4K now, which is great. And that is a good base to start at, especially if you're not using something like Filmic Pro or Open Camera to get access to more settings. But if you are using something like Filmic Pro, you do have a little bit more control over your image. You can change the compression, which is a very important one. You can change the resolution. You can change the shutter angle, the white balance. You can also change the color profile to a flat profile so you can grade it in post. But there are some things to consider here. Filmic Pro does have its limitations, and yes, indeed, its bugs. I've noticed seemingly locked settings like the shutter speed change after a couple of takes without me touching or unlocking it. And that can be really detrimental to a shot, as 1/200th of a second looks completely different to 1/50th of a second. And if you're looking for a cinematic shot, you're gonna wanna stay around the 1/50th of a second unless the 1/200th of a second is something that you're after. You can watch my video about shutter speed and shutter angle if you'd like to learn more about how that relates to a cinematic image, and I'll link that one above. But here is a really quick example about the certain effect that that would give you. You basically get a much more sharp, jittery image. There's less motion blur. Basically, it's good for things like fast motion, if you're doing a car chase or a fight sequence, but not if you want to get a natural looking shot. So how do you combat this on a mobile phone with an app that doesn't have exposure compensation, is unable to handle highlights very well, and with a lens that doesn't close down? The simple answer is investing in some ND filters, and there are a couple of different brands that make ND filters for phones, and I'll link them down below. I don't actually own any of them, so I can't really show you the effect. But if you don't know what ND filters are, you can think of them as sunglasses for your camera. Basically, they're different strength bits of glass that you put in front of the lens, and that lets less or more light in, depending on the strength, obviously, that you put in there. Which means you can open back up to 1/50th of a second and get back to that correct shutter angle. I mean, you can always just shoot at a higher shutter angle, like 1/200th of a second or whatever you need to get that correct exposure, but I wouldn't recommend it, especially if there's a lot of motion in the image. Sometimes it can work though. And we're gonna stop there for just one moment. Hello, Editing Felicia here. Yeah, the one that you never really get to speak to because usually everything goes sweet, but this episode didn't really go as smooth as I wanted it to. Like I was saying, with those bugs in Filmic Pro, I encountered a lot of problems with this.
I used Filmic Pro to film all of the examples in this video, and some of them came out okay, not the best, as the shutter angle kept changing, or the shutter speed kept changing, but there was one detrimental thing which set me back in all of my filming, which I figured I should tell you because it's a really, really important one, and I didn't pick up on it until I came to edit. So here we go. Let's find a piece of footage that I have actually shot in 60 frames per second, and we'll see if it's actually coming up as 60 frames per second. This is a good example. So I went into the metadata. Filmic Pro, what is this? This clip was filmed at 25 frames per second. Why is it importing as 8.78 frames per second? I've also opened this in other programs as well, and it's exactly the same thing. I opened up the file natively on my computer, and it's exactly the same thing. If somebody in the comments could shed some light on that, that would be awesome. So yeah, as you can see, that's pretty frustrating. We'll get back to it in just a moment. I just want to let you know that the examples that I refilmed were shot natively on the camera of the phone, not using any external apps like Filmic Pro or Open Camera, simply because I just can't trust it now that I've seen that issue. Just so you know as well, I am shooting on a Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. All right, let's get back to it. Two things that really make a cinematic image are the framing and the composition. They're very important aspects to any cinematic image, regardless of what you're shooting on. And considering that shooting on a mobile phone, you don't really have as much control over other things to get a cinematic image out of the phone, your framing and your composition are even more important. Both of them are tools to set your story in motion and progress it forward. So think about the content of your piece and what the story is behind it and how you're going to progress through that story. What does the framing and the composition say about that? Is there any camera movement that you could introduce that would progress that story even further or change the meaning of it? Maybe there's no story at all. Maybe you just want to make something look appealing. You could also use camera movement as a transition, which can really amp up your piece. Consider things like whip pans or passing across a dark object and then coming back out of that dark object to change scenes. There's a lot of different transitions you can do. Working hand in hand with framing, composition, and camera movement is lighting, which, to be honest with you, I can't stress enough how important this point is. You know what? It's probably more important than your story. Well, I mean that and sound. And if you are doing something with sound on your mobile phone, I wouldn't recommend using the internal microphone. I'd highly recommend investing in another microphone that you can plug into your phone. There's a couple of different brands out there. This one specifically is Rode, and I'll link that down below. But back to lighting. As I said earlier, using a mobile phone, you are restricted in your settings to get a cinematic image, so doing things that are visually appealing is a better way about it. Typically, mobile phones can't really handle highlights very well. It's just the camera and its capabilities just aren't up to scratch. So I wouldn't recommend shooting into a bright window or shooting outside in full sun. But if you have to shoot outside in full sun, consider where you are shooting. You might be able to find a little bit of shade somewhere in the shade of a building, under a tree, just something to cut that harsh light. Similarly, if you're shooting inside, don't shoot under a direct light. Try and bounce the light, try and form the light into a larger, soft source lighting, similar to what I'm using here. Now, you don't have to do this with any professional equipment, although professional equipment does help. You can use whatever lighting source you have and just turn it around and bounce it into a wall or a ceiling or a bit of cloth, whatever you need to get that reflection bounced back to you. Alternatively, you can also diffuse the light, or you can do both. You're just going to get a more flattering light, and the camera is going to be able to handle that light a lot better. So thank you very much for watching this video today. I hope you got something out of it. Yes, shooting on a phone is not ideal in most cases, in some cases depending on what you're doing, but I hope these 3 tips, if you are shooting on your phone, have helped you in some way to get a better image out of it. And if you really did like this video, please remember to give it a big fat thumbs up. And if you would like to see more of my face and learn a little bit more about filmmaking in the process, remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next Sunday.